South Africa's businesswoman and billionaire Magda Wierzycka says investors are becoming skeptical about South Africa. In a recent radio interview, Wierzycka revealing that asset managers in London, for example, say South Africa is becoming irrelevant. Now, her comments come as more critics are worried about the level of corruption across major state institutions. Magda Wierzycka joining us now via video link from New York. Thank you very much for making this time, Magda, and apologies for waking you up. I know that the time difference is quite hectic there. But let's begin with the comments that you have made recently, particularly around South Africa being a failed state in your very strong view. Why do you believe so?
Well, I think most of us looking at it can no longer, fool ourselves that we are doing anything else but living in a failed state. If I think back about even 3 years ago, we were already accepting things that were utterly unacceptable. We were accepting things such as a poor government, lack of job creation, flatlining economy, no support for business post-pandemic. And if you can imagine, we actually accepted it. What we are now being forced to accept is no longer a poor government, it's an incompetent one. It's no longer about creating jobs, it's actually about actively destroying those jobs, but not being able to manage the economy. We're no longer talking about supporting business. We are talking about, again, via load shedding, sabotaging businesses, and not big business. It's the SMEs that you most worry about. And again, not about flatlining the economy. We are now talking about actually killing the economy. And it's this inability to deal with the infrastructure, the corruption involved, the incompetency on display. Yeah. So, my issue is how can we even talk about South Africa being a non-failed state? And you're quite right. I was at a function in London 3 days ago. Yeah. With a whole lot of investment professionals, international investment professionals. And, clearly the subject of South Africa comes up. And they just looked at me and, because I was questioning them on the investability of South Africa. And I was told South Africa is irrelevant. It has become so small that it doesn't even feature on our radar screen. And they moved on to another topic.
Yeah. Magda, as I talk to you right now, we are beaming live visuals coming from the province of Mpumalanga. There, the residents this morning, we understand, even attacked the mayor who was trying to go there and address the issue of load shedding, which has now escalated and it's resulted in water supply being cut off to that community. People are angry on the ground. Do you think that the goodwill and favor that many people gave President Cyril Ramaphosa has faded? If so, why would you say that?
100%. I mean, it has, I had such hope, and I looked at my Twitter profile from, the election times, and I was hugely enthusiastic. And to be clear, I've never met President Ramaphosa personally, whatever people might think, but I not only gave him benefit of the doubt, I actually thought he was a force for change. Look at where we are now, and we know that he has been hugely disappointing on enormous amounts of levels. These kind of words of indecisive, not strategic come to mind. If I look at Zuma and Jacob Zuma and his presidency, he appointed ministers, his own ministers, left, right and center. If you look at Cyril, he can barely mention the word cabinet reshuffle. So you've got a leader who is not leading, and he's got all the power. And to be clear, absolutely all the power to make decisions, to change ministers, to issue commands. He seems to be completely, not paralyzed, he seems to be completely incapable of making those hard decisions or taking people on within the party where that needs to be done. So I have absolutely no doubt that we will see a lot more social unrest because, lack of water, a lack of electricity, that's no longer this concept of, the Guptas. Yeah. It's real. It's touching people's lives. So the only comment I have on this, social unrest that we are going to see, and we're going to see more of it, is that I would love for that social unrest to be channeled into a more constructive manner. And I know I've been told that in terms of, democracies, you probably can't do it. But I really, as an individual, I really would love to be in a position to be able to demand that the 2024 elections are brought forward to 2023. Why should we?
I want to actually end with that particular thought, because you have mentioned this, and I want you to just apply your mind a little as to why it is that you think this will help. But before we get there, the counter-argument from the Ramaphosa presidency, if you will, or administration, is going to be that, but what is Magda talking about? Because we have just had the latest installment of the South Africa Investment Summit, and there have been yet more pledges to come and invest in this country. So where does she get this idea that South Africa is not just a failed state, but that also there is a leader whom people have lost faith in because he's indecisive?
So, when I look at those investment conferences, there's a huge difference between a couple of things. One is pledges versus investment. To pledge something is not the same as to say, I will definitely follow through. And also, my understanding is a lot of these pledges, so the numbers that are being rolled up in the value of what has been pledged, really talks to companies just reinvesting in existing infrastructure. So this is not new investment, neither is it investment that will create jobs. So I think that is, not even a little, it is a smoke and mirrors situation.
Wow.
You really, I don't care about what I see in headlines and politically motivated headlines. I care about what I see on the ground. And what are we seeing on the ground? You look at Cape Town, where I live, and I've just checked the latest statistics. We have 15,000 people, homeless people, living in the center of Cape Town right now. There were no 15,000 people before. There were some, not 15,000.
Yeah.
I look at the fact that just a couple of days, again, we are talking, and I was picking it up right now via an email, once again sending an email to my head of IT to say, please hurry up ordering batteries and inverters for all our staff, because we need to make sure that they're okay. We clearly need to make sure that they can run the business going forward. Now, these are expenses. I saw Pick n Pay spent 552 million rand on diesel that they would not have spent otherwise, and could have grown, hired more people, increased salaries, so paid more tax.
Magda,
Magda, that's more relevant.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No.
My time is up, but I must put this to you very briefly and ask for a quick response. So the early elections, how is that going to help? But also importantly, why aren't many like you, established business people, coming out to voice out exactly what you are observing?
Well, in terms of the early elections, we are now being forced to wait a year and a half or so before we can actually, maybe a little bit less, to make our voices heard. And during that period, instead of people being at the polls, they are going to be in the streets protesting. And the situation is just going to get worse and worse and worse. So we are going to have another destroyed, whatever it might be, 18 months before, we deal with crisis. Let's do it now. If we do not have faith as a democracy in the government we have, then let's vote them out of power now. Right. Why just sit on the side and criticize? And then, in terms of business leaders, I think what's interesting is when I was given this kind of moniker of activist under Zuma, I did, when I looked at the stage, and I expected big business to support me. I looked left and I looked right, and I was alone. But when I look at what's happening in South Africa right now, I am seeing more and more business leaders being critical. Perhaps not as blunt as I am, because I've always been blunt, but there are more voices around me than ever before.
Magda Wierzycka, let me thank you very much for your time live for us in New York this morning.